Let's try and get back to Zanele Modise, who is the head of national organizing at Equal Education. Then, Zanele, thank you so much for the time, and hopefully you can hear me this time around. I suppose the interesting element and the important part here is whether we really are ready for Monday. Do you think we are?
Thank you so much for having me. And I think that is a very important question. And the kinds of conversations that we have been having as a country, we need to really take into account that anxiety is high. And I mean, I come from a social movement that is advocating for quality education in the country. And we have been advocating for the minimum norms and standards for school infrastructure. And you can imagine the kinds of conversations that we are having right now, and schools being ready to open its gates for learners next Monday. And I think it's telling that when provincial MECs for education are coming out and saying they aren't ready to accept teachers yet or to open gates for their teachers, and there be a postponement to that, it speaks to the readiness of schools. As I've also mentioned, that we have been advocating for the minimum norms and standards for school infrastructure, which we have seen just how the Department of Education, Basic Education and Provincial Education departments have missed very important deadlines that are speaking to the safety of the environment and making sure that learners in that environment are safe and learning in a space where it is conducive, that is not harming to their right to basic education. And we are dealing with many complexities. I mean, provided that schools have all the necessary equipment that is needed to make sure that learners are safe. I mean, it's quite a very difficult question to really grapple with at the moment. Yeah.
So what do we need then, Zanele? What do you think we actually need to get right, particularly at this time, to ensure that at the very least then we have the safest possible teaching zone and teaching area really for our pupils?
I mean, we know the kinds of environments that learners have been contending with for many years. We know that other schools have no water access. Other schools are using plain pit latrines, which are banned and are illegal in terms of the norms and standards for school infrastructure. I mean, we need to have clear plans that are speaking to when schools are going to be having all the necessities needed to make sure that the schooling environment is safe for everyone. And we know that a lot of schools, a lot of learners are using public transport. How have plans been speaking to that? I think it's very important to also monitor the conversations around that, because it's speaking to the hygiene in buses and to making sure that learners are safe to and from home, getting to school also, and making sure that they learn in an environment that is really conducive, and, you know, even their parents at home would be calmed down.
Yeah. Zanele, then, if you were part of the Command Council and you were part of the decision to, ensure that schools go back at some point, when would be the ideal time? Would you actually go back this year at any stage? Would you perhaps go back later parts of the year? Or is there anything else perhaps in your thinking? If you were part of that Command Council, what would you do?
I mean, also using my existence in a movement that is advocating for education, it really becomes a tough conversation to have, because you are looking at losing the entire schooling year. What would it mean for learners who are supposed to go to university next year? What would it mean for learners in grade 7 having to transition to high school? I think there has been reports that are coming out that we are going to be with this virus for 12 to 18 months, and we have to then make sure that we deal with the new normal space that we find ourselves in, and we make this space that we find ourselves in normal. And I mean, children have to be faced back to schools one point or the other. We just have to make sure that those schools are environments that are safe and conducive to them.
Yeah. Would you recommend a zonal opening of schools, particularly safer areas being able to open, the areas that aren't safe necessarily, to then perhaps keep things closed for in the meantime?
I mean, what would it mean then to have that conversation and have it, being practical about that, having other learners or other schools being open and having others not being open. You are speaking also to equality and the kinds of conversations that we have been having with young people of not being able to study at home, of not being able to have access to all the learning materials. So I think we can't have that conversation if we are going to disconnected from the inequalities that we have seen heightened by the pandemic that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. Zanele, appreciate the time. Really a tough one across the board, not just for yourselves to deal with, but certainly for government to be a part of as well. Zanele Modise is the national head then of the rights organization Equal Education there, joining us for that discussion. A very difficult one. Monday is the day, it seems, that schools will be opening, perhaps not for all of them, but certainly for a lot of them. We'll come back with a few more news items as well right after the short break. Do stay tuned. This is On Point.